From Group of Seven Comics, I'm Jason Lapidus.
And I'm Chris Sanagan, and you're listening to True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to a special edition of the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's May 3rd, 2021. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. These podcasts are published to celebrate the exhibitors of this year's virtual edition of the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. TCAF is an annual event gathering comic book creators from around the world to promote broad and diverse voices towards the betterment of the medium of comics through panels, keynote exclusives, and just basically enjoying the fun of comics. On this episode, I chat with Chris Sanagan and Jason Lapidus at TCAF 2021. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Based in Ontario, Chris is the writer and Jason is the illustrator for their current work, Group of Seven. The ongoing series is set in the First World War, in which Canadian physician John McCrae leads a secret mission underneath the ridge against a mysterious enemy with monstrous intentions. Group of Seven, A Most Secret Tale was nominated for Best Graphic Novel at the 2020 Sequential Magazine Awards. At TCAF 2021, they're promoting Peregrines, described as frontline nurses doing double duty as home front defenders as they fight in the shadows to protect Canada from threats unbelievable and unknown. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Chris Sanagan and Jason Lapidus at TCAF 2021. So, Chris and Jason, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Nice to talk again, John.
I appreciate your time. Now, we're here under the context of the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, and I know we've met up at the show in the past, so I'm wondering if you have any special festival moments that you like to share.
Ooh. Chris, you go first, please.
Sure, of course. I absolutely, especially connected to Group of Seven Comics, the very first Toronto Comic Arts Festival that Jason and I went to together. Jason, I don't know if it was your first. I think it was my first, just in general. But we went with. I went with copies of issue 1 manuscript of Group of Seven Comics #1 in hand to try and solicit some feedback from some creators who I absolutely respected in the Canadian comics community, and ended up speaking to a number of people who now we count among our friends and have beers with during regular times. So that was pretty special. We spoke to Scott Chandler. And he was there as well, and a few others, Anthony Falcone, a few people who were promoting their own books and actually were kind enough to provide me with some advice, just general advice on the script. I had people read it and email me the next day with some thoughts. So again, it really kind of was this. Jason and I had really embarked upon this new project, and we really hadn't shown it out to anyone yet. And yet we were at this place full of creators, so many of whom took the time to talk to us as emerging creators and share their thoughts on what we were up to and maybe just some advice for getting going. So that was a pretty special moment. That might have been 2016 now that I'm thinking about it. TCAF 2016. Yeah.
Cool. How about you, Jason?
That was a good memory. I enjoyed going to my first couple TCAFs with you as well, Chris. It was fun. I really have enjoyed meeting new friends while we've gone, whether it be people who are established creators who have since become friends, or meeting emerging creators who have grown to become friends as well. So you walk past someone's table and their cover art of their book draws you in and you start a conversation. And given that, Chris and I both share the trait of not being shy with strangers. we seem to feel very comfortable at these kinds of events, and we're happy to talk to anyone. And we know that people do enjoy talking about their own work, so it's really, people are easy to engage, and we've been able to make some friends with people who were kind of just getting their foot in the door, and to watch their work grow over the last few years has been such a treat. So I really enjoy meeting new creators and emerging ones while at TCAF, because you just, you live in your own bubble, and you don't really know what else someone could create until you see what they make, and people make the coolest stuff. So I really enjoyed seeing people's original work that I never would have anticipated, and making new friends. It's been amazing.
Yeah, it is cool. For sure, for sure. So we're here talking about your latest project that you're introducing at TCAF called Peregrines, the Obstacle Course. I know you've hinted about that to me in the past, sort of off the record, but now it's finally here. How would you describe that book to someone, and maybe talk a bit about the inspiration?
Do you want to go first, Chris, or do you want me to go?
Yeah, sure. No, I can go first. So we actually have a couple of books debuting at TCAF. The first one is just called Peregrines, and Peregrines is the next comic book series, from us and from Group of Seven Comics, and it's issues of Group of Seven Comics 7, 8, 9, and 10 with the title Peregrines. And so that is our new series, our new dedicated comic series that's coming up, and it is about. It takes place in the same universe as Group of Seven, so back in the First World War. And just like Group of Seven, A Most Secret Tale, it crisscrosses across, Canadian history, 20th, 19th century Canadian history. But in this case, it's a team of all female covert agents who belong to an organization that has been protecting the Dominion of Canada from the unknown and the unbelievable since Confederation. And in fact, they lead double lives. They are Canadian Army nurses on the front lines, but also lead double lives as spies and adventurers and home front defenders as well. So it's a nice way for us to expand on the universe that was first introduced in Group of Seven, Most Secret Tale, and take it in new directions and really kind of bust out the boundary of that book to, bleed and lean more into the bit of the fantastical, perhaps the supernatural, just those kind of elements, and then, but at the same time, put it in a very comfortable space that of the First World War and those events and moments in Canadian histories and those characters that we can kind of bring forward on these brand new action-packed adventures of espionage and action. I know I said action again, but I'm going to say it twice.
That's worth saying twice. That's good.
It is worth saying twice. It's a huge part of it. And then that spills over into the other book that we're debuting at TCAF, which is exclusive only to TCAF in terms of sale, which is called Peregrines, the Obstacle Course, which is it's a spin-off, and it was almost like a fluke. It was just something we tried. We wanted to play around with format. And we made a daily comic on Instagram for the month of February, where every day we would release 3 panels exclusively on Instagram in that square format for each panel. And when it was finished, we had a substantial amount of pages that we could put into a comic book form. So we decided to modify it just slightly to match a comic, a traditional proportion of a comic book, the dimensions, and created a cover and a couple more pages to round out the story, and we're releasing it exclusively at TCAF. So the Obstacle Course, although it is definitely connected to the 4-issue series of Peregrines, it is a standalone adventure, mostly wordless, about the 4 women on an adventure in the German Bavarian, the Alps, I guess. They're out in the Alps on a recovery mission in some sort of dark and brooding castle, and it's very self-explanatory, and it can serve as almost like a primer for Peregrines in a creative way. I mean, for me, it was drawing it, in a very short period of time and getting 3 panels done a day, and again in a short amount of time. It allowed me to develop a shorthand for each of the characters in a very small window, which better armed me or better prepared me for drawing Peregrines, I guess, essentially full time. So it's like a really good warm up comic book as a creator, and as a reader, it's fun. It is just a fun adventure story. So, and it's in full color as well. So it's our first comic in color. It's exclusively digital in its creation, as opposed to the traditional pen and ink and ink wash that the other books have been done. So it stands out amongst the set, which is one of the reasons it's not numbered as one of the 7 issues that are available now.
That sounds pretty cool. I was going to ask you about research, and maybe Jason, you can address this first. I know the
Sure.
group of 7 traditionally male characters, where Peregrines are female. Did you have to do any more research into clothing, the different types of accoutrements, let's say, in warfare that they would have that men would not?
Absolutely.
How'd you go through that?
I started with looking at what nurses wore and combining that with a lot of time just drawing for pleasure, trying to figure out like what shapes look good. And that was one of the same problems, that I encountered designing characters for the first story arc of Group of 7 is like, this army outfit looks good on no one. It doesn't fit anybody. And when it comes to putting women in action in nurses' outfits or some sort of costume that is a nod to the nursing outfit, it's going to be even more difficult to find something that actually is good looking, fun to draw, and relates movement and action, and like lends itself well to a streamlined version of drawing action. So there was probably about 2 years of just exploring different designs and how long are the coats going to be and how many buttons and what are the different styles we could try. And finally things solidified this year. And I had to go back and redraw a few pages or a few panels here or there of older drawings, but mostly for the battle gear, there's more imagination, and while they're on their day job or in their real identities, relying heavily on photo reference for the garb that the nurses wore on the front lines, which was similar, of course, to the British. So some research definitely there. And as I probably mentioned even a year ago, like hairstyles, learning to draw women's hair that was contemporary for 1917 for professionals and the different stages of their day. So have to have their hair out of the way while they're working, and then there's their hair when they're backstage talking to each other, and then of course their hair when they're in action. So things adjusted a lot. It's a lot of hair to draw for some very different women.
I bet.
Classic like Ninja Turtle problem. How do you make 4 characters that are wearing costumes look different in black and white without being able to give them colored bandanas or something? So there have been some unique hairstyles for each of the women so that the reader will be able to follow along as to who is who. So lots of research. Fun. Really fun research though.
Yeah. How about you, Chris? Was there any extra work you had to do in order to prepare for this story?
Well, I think when I came across, and I say came across, I was already aware of the nursing sisters and their role in the First World War and the Canadian nursing sisters. But then I started kind of with Group of 7. We were looking at some opportunities to add in additional characters, and I did some more research into the nursing sisters specifically because they were there with them. They're not thought of as they didn't take combat roles, but they were right there in the field hospitals and not too far away from the front. So I started doing a little bit of research, and upon that, realized that not only kind of confirmed my suspicions that not only were they an extraordinary group of women to have volunteered to head overseas on this in this conflict to tend to the sick and the wounded and to help out in any way that they could and leave their their lives in Canada, but then the actual they exhibited, just because of the rank of nursing sister as designated by the Canadian Army, came with a whole bunch of unique, extraordinary pieces that are really, when you look at it back now, were not women of the day did not experience the same kind of luxury. So, for example, the nursing sisters first and foremost held rank. So they were lieutenants in the army, so they actually held rank over men. That's something that already kind of put them in their own class of or category. Because they held rank, they also received pay equal to that rank as part of the armed forces relative to the men. Again, something that not all women, certainly not most women in Canadian society at the time would have experienced if they were in fact working. They also so they're already, because they're part of the army, they had the ability to vote. Canadian women, or I should say, not all Canadian women, but many Canadian women received the ability to vote in 1917. Indigenous women were not allowed to vote in that election and didn't receive the vote till later. But for the women who were given the right to vote in 1917, they actually held it before, because they could vote as part of elections as part of the army. So again, this class, this category of women were already doing extraordinary things. They were already leading these extraordinary lives. They were the only, and all those things I mentioned, holding rank and such, they were the first among the Allied forces to do so. In the entire history of the combatants of the Allied forces in the First World War, they were the only ones to hold that rank. So wow. Yeah, so they're already doing extraordinary things, part of this extraordinary group. So wanted to build on that. So the research really kind of fleshed that out. And as soon as, again, looking at the research to things like holding rank and those kinds of pieces, we can then, work those into scenarios and situations in the book as well. And so we play around with that a lot. We play around a little bit with the dynamic of attitudes towards women, certainly attitudes towards women, nursing sisters, close to the front lines. And then, we flip that orthodoxy because in fact, because they were maybe, popularly kind of less known than the narrative that we know of the war, which is primarily white and male, certainly from the Canadian perspective, about who participated in the achievements that they got and they were able to attain. We can play around a lot with this idea that, no wonder that there's, it's going to take a group of people who may not get a second look. It's going to take a group of people who might emerge from the shadows. If we really want to talk about a covert organization that's going to be protecting the Dominion of Canada, they can't be the ones who are, maybe out in front and everyone kind of knows their names a little bit. So play around with those kind of tropes and kind of weave that research into the story. The big difference being that all the 4 characters are fictional. So with Group of 7, those are all obviously was a fictional tale using real people. If Peregrines, they are inspired by real women, and they are surrounded by famous women in Canadian history, but they themselves are fictional characters.
Right. Very good. I want to take a step back and maybe ask you more of a philosophical question. If you consider our current pandemic situation, it's kind of opportune that your story features nurses from almost 100 years ago, and yet here we are almost 100 years later, and we're almost, I wouldn't say in the same type of predicament, but I'm wondering if our current situation has impacted your story or could be a factor for a future story.
Oh, Jason, you want to...
If our current situation or predicament impacts the story, we didn't have to pivot at all. Our story does not and did not include any kind of, virus or contagion or anything like that where we felt it would be in bad taste to continue. So that was good. Chris, you composed a tale that was a more straight narrative that didn't involve any of that kind of stuff. So that was good. In terms of moving forward, I don't know. I'm thrown for a loop because of the question. I'm not sure. What do you think? Like, in terms of, I think that the way that maybe it's impacted is just that, again, on a personal level, I've spent more time thinking about frontline nurses and what they deal with. And I've been drawing these panels. There are several scenes in the comic in the first issue where the nurses are working. And they're on the front lines, and they're in their medical tent, in their hospital tent, and they're working, and they're tending to patients, and they're working tirelessly. And I have been drawing that while the pandemic has been going on. And I'm prone to reflection, so I do often think about the kinds of things that people really do have to go through on the day to day, and it's just very different. I think that maybe the biggest difference would probably be the sense of sheer isolation that the nurses today go through, given that so many of them have been isolated from their families because of this as well, and there's no break from it. It just doesn't seem to, there's no end to the amount of patients that need care. But I don't know. I'm not sure what connections we can make between the current situation and anything in the comic book. I don't know. Chris,
yeah, I mean, a couple of thoughts. There's an interesting parallel off the bat between the rhetoric we use today about fighting a war against the pandemic, or we're in a battle. I mean, it's a rhetoric that's used by politicians. You see it often in media, and so there is an interesting parallel there with frontline nurses fighting, but fighting. Obviously not fighting, fists or fighting that, but just, trying to stop something. And certainly there's that parallel with the rhetoric of the war, the First World War.
For sure. Even the fact that it's called frontline workers.
Right.
Like the very use of that language is a military term, right?
Right, exactly. So there's that. I will say, I think probably what it does is it shines a light on the amazing work that nurses have always done that I think, maybe goes either not necessarily underappreciated, but may not take the spotlight or has not taken the spotlight for some time, except in times of crisis. My mom was a public health nurse. Nursing is very close to my heart and close to my family. And there is, there are times where perhaps it's, it has not been given the due or the importance that comes in times of crises and the literal work that has to be done on those front lines. And I mean, the story of the nursing sisters in the First World War isn't one that, I mean, it has some, you can hear more about it these days for sure. There's it's highlighted as much more of a totality of the story, the narrative of the First World War, but it wasn't for a long time. It wasn't for a long time. And so there's opportunity there again to shine light on those stories that deserve a little more, deserve to be talked about and to be shared in the same breath as the other popular narratives that we often talk about.
Good stuff. Yeah, no, I appreciate your thoughts on that. I was just thinking, ruminating, I guess, on how we could draw comparisons, but I appreciate your feedback on that. So we've talked about your books that'll be at TCAF. I'm wondering what's next. Can you talk about what's coming for you down the road?
Well,
what's next, Chris?
We got our 2 books coming out. That's a big deal for us.
Oh, it is. I'm not.
No, I know.
You have way down the road.
Well, okay. Well, yeah, no. So we have mapped out this Peregrine series, right? So the issues are mapped out and structured. Jason and I are going to spend the next 18 months or so, getting those out into the world, and then likely combining them into a trade paperback, which will be Group of 7, Volume 2, Peregrines, which is pretty exciting. But we've already written down a few story ideas. I've written a few scripts for the next thing after Peregrines. Jason, I don't think we're not spoiling anything. We talk. I don't know. Are we? Are you?
Go ahead.
Okay. You give me the green light. All right. So one thing. Okay. So Jason and I love our comics, and we love our comics history, and we love that feeling of engaging in a medium and having it, really reconnect us with certain experiences in our life, or being a kid, or grabbing that comic from the spinner rack. Those really imprinted on us. And so one thing that always imprinted on both of us is the idea of the annual comic.
Oh, okay. Yep.
The comic that was, 50 pages or 40 pages, or, the one that was not necessarily in maybe some continuity. Maybe some of it was from continuity, but a lot of it was kind of standalone stories. So we really are keen to put out a Group of 7 comics annual following Peregrines, and to that end, again, we have some story ideas, some scripts already in the works. We love these characters. We love all of these characters. I think one of the most important pieces of this whole of this, what we do here is that we want to get back to, like, Group of Seven Most Secret Tale was done, and we had written and started Peregrines. And immediately after, like, some of the Peregrines pieces were, like, solidified, we, like, wanted to rewrite, Peggy and John McCrae and, like, those characters who we spent so much time and love with. So now we've added, like, more characters to that, to that staple. We're creating the universe building. And so because of that, we're excited to, like, have some team ups, some combos to just, again, really kind of hammer home the connections of that world that we've kind of tapped a toe into, the very real connections, and also kind of play around with stories inspired by people and events in Canadian history.
Cool. Good stuff.
Yeah,
well, thanks for sharing.
That sounds good. I keep having to, like, I fight with you on this one. You call it annual. I always say it's got to be giant sized.
Giant size.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because we're not making it annually.
Right. And also giant size X-Men is the one where they burst to the cover, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we're aiming for, bursting to the cover.
Good stuff. Well, I know we're typically at TCAF, it's all about meeting people, but it's also about selling books. So I'm wondering where you recommend people go online to find your books and to buy them.
Well, I was going to say, so to get our books, reach out, go to our website at www.groupofsevencomics, that's the number 7comics.ca. And right away is an order form right in the first bit of that website that links to the Peregrines, that links to our other books, posters, prints, sketches. But by TCAF, so we'll have our site at TCAF will be part of that online marketplace, so people can buy their books there. But the website is the always this place to buy our books. Yeah, I don't know. Is there? Oh, and of course, there's a number of digital outlets as well, I guess, is the other place that you can buy them. We're on Comixology, for example. So if digital comics are your thing, we're on Comixology. We're also on Gumroad, which is our own site as well that hosts our digital files, as well as Spinwiz Comics, and maybe even a couple more in the near future, which once they launch, we'll share that information.
Sounds good. And just before we leave, I know you guys have a YouTube channel that you started up. I wonder if you want to talk a wee bit about that.
Sure. We started up a YouTube channel, Group of Seven Comics, and we started posting our weekly chats. I mean, given that the pandemic has limited our ability to see each other face to face, Chris and I have still very much enjoyed the time we've been able to spend virtually. So we've been every Friday, usually around Friday around 4:30, we've been meeting on Instagram to have a cup of tea together and talk about what we've done for the week, what we've been reading, what we've been listening to, and what we've been making, and any other tidbits or conversation threads that we wanted to go down. And then we've taken those episodes from Instagram and shortened them and put them up on YouTube. And I think they're entertaining in both forms for various reasons. At least I hope they are to different audiences. But yeah, you can find us on YouTube if you search Group of Seven Comics, and of course at Group of Seven Comics on Instagram. Fridays at 4:30, you can follow Tea Time with Group of Seven Comics.
Thanks to Chris and Jason for the chat. You can discover more about Chris on Twitter at Chris Sanagan, and Jason is on Twitter at Jason Lapidus. You can discover more about Group of Seven on Twitter at Group of Seven Comics, and that's the numeral 7, and online at Group of 7, numeral 7, comics.ca. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts, and please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.